So first of all, let me welcome you all to the 2021 Innovative Idea Competition at Temple University, sponsored by the Innovation and Entrepreneurship Institute. And tonight we're going to do our first workshop in a series of 3 workshops. And we're going to be focused on discovering your idea. So that's the name of the workshop. I'm going to cover a number of different things during this workshop related to your idea or that early stage of discovering your idea. But before we jump into the material, I'd like to take a couple minutes and give you an overview of the competition, because many of you, this may be the first time that you're thinking of entering the Innovative Idea Competition. And so it might be helpful for you to have a little bit of background and know some of the key dates that are coming up and also the resources that are available to help you in this process, all right? So it's our 24th annual Innovative Idea Competition. It's perfect for anyone who's thinking of becoming an entrepreneur and you're in that early stage, because it's focused more on the idea than it is on developing a full-blown business plan on how to launch that idea into a full venture. All right, so it's a great way to get started. And everybody's got ideas, right? So why not you? Why not take a chance, enter the competition? It's relatively low stakes to do that. And you may be surprised and find yourself as one of the finalists with an opportunity to win some money. So virtually anybody within the Temple community, as defined as students, faculty, alumni, and staff, are eligible to participate. And there's really very few disqualifying requirements. So yes, if you've earned more than $5,000 in other competitions or accelerator programs, or if you've raised more than $25,000 in capital from institutional organizations, then yeah, you might want to contact us separately and talk about whether or not you'd be eligible in the competition. But most people that are targeting this competition are eligible to enter and participate. And then also you should be aware that if you do make it and are selected as a finalist, you will be pitching your ideas hopefully live this year, all right, in November. So we're hoping to be able to still be in a position where we can have in-person live events, and we'll be able to go ahead and do that. You'll be pitching live to the judges and our viewing audience in the 1810 Accelerator space. If something comes up and we're not able to do that live, we're well prepared to take this online, since that's the way we ran it last year, and we'll be doing it that way. Some key overview dates. So last week we held a kickoff with how I won the Innovative Idea Competition, where we invited one of our winners from last year to come back and talk about her experience, and that was Jonna Shreves-Taylor. That video from last week's session has been recorded and it'll be posted up on our Google Drive and shared with anybody who registers to be part of this competition. So you want to make sure that you use this QR code. If you haven't already registered for the competition, please do that. Make sure you register, because otherwise you won't have access to that Google folder, and it's got all kinds of great information in it. It's going to have video recordings of the workshops, the slide decks that I use in these workshops, as well as some other really good, helpful tips that you're going to want to have to take advantage of. So other key dates are October 20th is the submission deadline. The submission portal to start entering doesn't open until October 1st, all right? The entering process or the submission process is pretty simple. And what I'd encourage you to do is open up a Word document and start capturing everything that you want to submit in that Word document. And then when you're ready to actually submit, you can simply cut and paste from your Word document right into the submission portal, and it'll really simplify the entire process for you to make your entry. Also, I mentioned that the actual pitch competition happens in November. So that's on Thursday, November 18th, and it's going to run from 4 to 6 p.m. Now, we'll also be doing workshops for the next 3 nights with possibly some optional workshops that we hold after that. But we'll be doing these workshops the next 3 nights from 5 to 6 or 6:30. So why enter? Well, one is you might want to test out your idea. This is a great way to work on developing an idea, learn what that process is all about, and get feedback. And you're going to get feedback from the judges and the reviewers that evaluate your idea and score it. And we use their scores to determine who gets into the finals. But also, there's prize money available. So this year we have over $5,000. There's a grand prize. There are 2 tracks, an upper track for graduate students, faculty, staff, or alumni. And then we have an undergraduate track that's dedicated just to undergraduate students. We also have the very coveted People's Choice Award that's voted on by our crowd, the Global Innovation Prize for ideas that could be taken global, who have the most potential for having global impact. And then this year we have a brand new award that we're going to be offering in partnership with IBIT, and I'm going to talk about that now. So we're going to be offering this year for the first time ever the Digital Innovation Award, and that's sponsored by the Digital Innovation Foundry. There will be potentially 2 $1,000 award, but there's a guarantee of 1. But if there's a second entry that has high potential and they feel it's deserving of it, they'll give a second award. So potentially 2 $1,000 awards. In addition to the cash prize, you'll also get entry into the Digital Innovation Foundry Lab, where you'll get resources to help work on and develop your idea. And you'll also get mentorship that'll help support you in your journey if you decide to go on and enter in the Be Your Own Boss Bowl competition in the spring. Now, what qualifies for this award? Well, there are some criteria. One is it's got to be digital, right? So it has to be an idea that applies some type of technology in an interesting or novel way. And that's one of the things that one of the benefits of being in their program is they'll help you pursue that and try to prove out whether or not there is a technology and which technology might be the most appropriate one for you to use. Also, the problem that you're trying to solve has to be, either a real business or societal problem, and it has to be practical. So it can't be like a flying car idea, which is not quite there yet, but it has to be something that a current technology would be able to be used for. All right. In terms of the requirements, one of the things they wanted to make sure that we shared with everyone is that you will own your idea. So even though you might be getting help from the university on developing it, looking at the technology, you'll still own the intellectual property to that idea. All right. They're only going to have a supporting role. And that's very important for you to know. And then the other thing you have to be aware of is that recipients of this award have to participate in their Digital Innovation Foundry showcase that takes place later in the year. But that's actually an honor. That's something you should be looking forward to in sharing your idea with others. So let's move on. How do we rate the submissions? There's 6 categories that we're going to ask you to upload your answers to these. So one is the elevator pitch. The second one is we're going to ask you to describe the opportunity or the problem that you're looking to solve. Then we're going to ask you to describe who are your competitors and how are your current customers, targeted customers, how are they solving that problem today? Third or fourth, of course, is, well, so what's your solution? What's your idea? How does it work? And how does it solve that problem? Fifth is, who are your customers or users? Because sometimes your users and your customers are 2 different groups. And then who else does this idea impact? And then lastly is, what are your plans to address unknowns and challenges? So since the idea competition is focused on early stage ideas, there's often areas of this idea that you will not have had time to explore yet. And that's fine. We expect that. But we'd like to have some feedback from you as part of your submission on, well, what are those areas that you really aren't sure of yet? What are some of the challenges that you haven't really solved yet? And then what would be your plan to address those. You don't have to have solved them yet, but we'd like to know, how do you plan to go about getting the answers to those unknowns or those challenges? All right. And then 7, optionally, you can upload as part of your submission any drawings or sketches. If you have any short videos that help to explain your idea or your concept, or if you have a pitch deck, a short pitch deck that helps to explain this idea and how it solves the problem and who it's helping. Those are optional, though. You do not have to upload any of those as part of your submission. Now, you'll notice that on the right-hand side, there are some numbers in red. Those are the suggested order in which you should be thinking about and approaching this competition. So the numbers on the right, that's how we typically would see a pitch presented. But on the right, the numbers on the right are typically how you should be thinking about it. So number 1 is you want to be focused on who it is you're trying to help and what's the problem or the opportunity that you've identified that they have, right? So that's why that's 1A and 1B. Number 2 is you then be looking at, well, who's already out there offering a similar type solution, and how are those customers currently solving that problem? So you want to make sure you understand that. And that requires some research, right? Then number 3 is you'd be saying, okay, well, now that I understand my customers' needs, the problems they're having and the opportunity that's there, and what other alternatives are out there, you should be brainstorming to come up with, well, what's my idea for solving that problem? How am I going to do it better than what's already out there, what exists today? And then one of the last things you would work on is really your elevator pitch. So once you've thought this through, you've done your research, and I'll get into a little more of that in the workshop, then you're going to be pulling that all together into a really shortened, very succinct elevator pitch. That's just an elegant statement that you could give to somebody to explain your concept quickly, easily, gets them hooked, that they understand what it is you're doing and the value you provide, and gets them interested enough that they want to find out more and ask you questions, right? So that's the process. That's how those submissions are rated. And then you can also see in parentheses, we list the points. So that's the weighting of each of those sections. All right. So you need a good idea, but you also need a good story. And so the story is something that you're going to be developing as you go along. First, you need all of the information before you can think through how you're going to craft that story. We'll talk about that more in another workshop, but there's always a compelling story to the successful winners of these competitions. All right, key resources. We have tonight's workshop, next Wednesday's workshop, and then the workshop on October 6th. This is the QR code to sign up for those workshops if you haven't already. And again, the submission deadline is October 20th. So between the 6th and the 20th, you still have a couple weeks, and there's some other resources that we're going to make available for you. You can register also for those workshops on Startup Tree. All of the workshops are up there under the events. You can find them there pretty easily. And then I want to mention to you, I mentioned earlier about the Google Drive and how we've offered, we will be offering the video recordings, the copies of these slide decks, but we also offer a great resource that I'm showing here on the screen, which is our tips and guidelines for submission, where it takes each section of the submission, it breaks it down into the kinds of questions that the judges are going to be looking for you to answer. And then it also gives you tips about how to think about it, how to approach it, how to prepare your answer. All right. This is the link to that Google Drive. But again, I want to encourage you, make sure you register for the competition. We'll also share this link out to you in your welcome email for the competition. So make sure you're doing that. Other key resources, we offer mentoring help. We have e-strategists that are available on our Startup Tree platform. You can book appointments with them. You can book appointments with me through Startup Tree to listen to your idea and get feedback on your ideas. There's a peer mentoring event that the Entrepreneurial Student Association does on October 13th from 12 to 1. There's going to be an expert mentoring event with some of our mentors from the Startup Tree platform the evening of October 18th. And then, as I mentioned, the final submissions are due on the 20th. There's also Blackstone Launchpad, which is over in the downstairs, the lower level of the Student Center. They have mentoring help available as well. You can go in and talk to them about your ideas. Okay, so most people are here for one reason or another, right? In this workshop, you're either interested in competing in the idea competition. It may be because you're using this as a dry run to get ready for the Be Your Own Boss Bowl. It could be that you're trying to use this as a way to learn this process of thinking about ideas that might eventually become a venture. Or it may be that you definitely are committed to launch your business because you want to be your own boss, right? You don't want to be working on helping someone else achieve their dreams. You want to be able to achieve your own dreams and be your own boss. So for whatever the reason is, it doesn't make a difference, because this is a great, this whole program is just a great way to get your feet wet, learn about the resources that are available, and learn about this process. So quick show of hands, if you wouldn't mind. I'd like to see, and you can vote by raising your hand in the participants window. How many of you are here because you're looking for an idea, you don't really have an idea yet that you know you want to submit into the competition? Or how many of you may be in a situation where you either, or where you have too many ideas and you don't know how to narrow it down, okay? So those of you, okay, so those of you who have an idea already, let's see, you're raising your hands. Let's do that one first. All right, so pretty much everybody's got an idea. Okay, does anybody have too many ideas and you just don't know how to whittle it down to the right one? Same group of people? Okay, that's all right. So we'll be talking a little bit about how to narrow it down, but we'll be talking more about that on next week's workshop. All right. Okay. So next question is, if you haven't, so have you defined your problem? All right. Have you really come up with a problem statement of what you want to be solving? Okay. And also, either you haven't done that yet, or you have, and not only have you done that, but you've also gone out and you've tested it. You've talked to people about the problem, you've talked to them, and you've gotten verification back that they, in fact, really do agree with you. So let's take a look at it. Vote first on, you haven't defined the problem yet, you don't know what you're really focused on. Anybody in that category? Okay, a couple. All right, and then how about, I've gone out, I've talked to people, I've verified that this is a real problem and it's significant enough to be working on. Anybody in that category? Okay, all right, one person, good, all right. So good, thanks for answering those. That gives me a little bit of a feel for the audience and where I should maybe spend a little bit more of my time, all right? All right, so let's keep going here. So this is a cartoon I found that I think oftentimes, kind of expresses how a conversation, an early conversation goes when I talk to people about their ideas. So they start off by saying, I have the best idea ever. It's like Facebook or Twitter and sliced bread all rolled into one. And then we get into this discussion, and sometimes they walk away and they're like, oh, this idea is horrible. And, all I would say to you is that you can't be discouraged by that, whether you're talking to me or whether you're talking to other people about your ideas. Part of being, an entrepreneur, or, a young starting entrepreneur, is you got to have faith in your ideas. You got to believe in yourself and in your abilities. And you need to talk to a lot of people about it to get feedback. So you're going to oftentimes hear negative feedback. That's okay. Although I will say that one of the things we will talk about later on is, there's a certain point in time where when you hear enough of that, it's time for you to kind of step back and reevaluate, all right? So a lot of times the way this kind of discussion unfolds is people will come in, hey, I've got this great idea, Greg. They tell me what their idea is, all right? I'll ask them, so, who's your customer? And most people, they pretty much have a general idea of who would want this idea, who would like buy it. And then I'll say, okay, well, what's the job that you're trying to accomplish for them? In other words, what's the problem or need, or what do they have to have? What is it you're trying to solve on their part? Now, at that point, a lot of times people have never thought about it from the perspective of the job to be done. They've only thought about it as, hey, I've got this great idea. I think people would want this. But you got to dig a little deeper. Then you go into, all right, well, so what value are you delivering to people? And sometimes that word value throws you. And now people are kind of puzzled. They get a little concerned. I'm not really sure what you mean by value. Again, that's okay. And then finally, I'll say, well, so how are you different and better from what they're currently doing now? And at that point in time, maybe they haven't done their competitive analysis. Maybe they haven't really spent any time talking to the people that they're going to be proposing this to learn what they're actually already doing today. Okay. And in some cases, what it may be is their entire experience, their idea, the problem they're trying to solve, everything about it is all related to something they've experienced personally. And that's common. A lot of people come into the idea competition from that perspective. And there's nothing wrong with that. But what I would encourage you is you got to expand your horizons here. Right now, it's time to move beyond your world and start venturing out into the real world and talk to other people to see if they share this same problem, and if they share it and they're experiencing it in the same way you are. All right. So, there's an old expression that ideas are a dime a dozen, and that's just meant to be that, there's hundreds, thousands of ideas, and that's okay. There's lots of those ideas are great ideas, but a lot of them aren't. And, some people they generate 10, 15, 100 ideas, but they're really just not that good. And so it takes lots and lots and lots of ideas to really work down through this funnel. Okay. And this is a funnel showing what it takes from raw ideas to actually reaching the point of one commercial success of taking an idea to a commercial business. All right. Having it be successful in that respect. So this looks overwhelming. Like, how am I ever going to generate 3,000 ideas? Well, you might not need to. And if you follow part of this process that I'm going to talk about the next couple of weeks, you won't necessarily have to generate 3,000 ideas. All right. So don't look at this as this overwhelming challenge of, I can't possibly generate that many ideas. Look at this from the perspective of, this is a great opportunity to collect and generate as many as you can by yourself, with your team, with your friends, your family, your roommates. And you just need to figure out how to generate all of those. And then in the second workshop, we're going to talk about how you take all those ideas and you can now look for ways to whittle down those that have value, those that don't, and also look for the ones that have value and how you combine them and make them more valuable and stronger and better ideas. So, as I mentioned, look at this as an opportunity, not so much as an insurmountable challenge that you're going to be facing. And what I want to do right now is try to get you very focused on your customer and have you, again, as I mentioned, stop thinking about this. If you've been looking at this as a problem that you've experienced and you think you've got a great idea for how to solve this, I want to get you out of that mode and get you to start thinking about other people that would be your customer and what their experience is. We want everything to be customer centric. And as such, we're going to want it to be, we're going to want to use a concept called design thinking. So a customer centric approach would be, what are you passionate about to start with? So if you have ideas right now, for those of you who have ideas, I would hope that they're in areas that you're really interested in, you're really passionate about. all right? And the reason is because being an entrepreneur is hard, and as time goes on and challenges, start to face you, if you're not really passionate about this idea, if you don't really care about it, and it starts to get to be a lot of hard work, you're going to lose that incentive to keep going and to work through those challenges. So hopefully you want to start from the perspective of, I really care about this, and when the going gets tough, you'll keep going, all right? But then you also want to think about, so who am I interested in helping? So if people don't necessarily have something that they can put their finger on as their passion. For example, I like photography, I like sailing, I like watches, I like lots of different things, right? I like cooking, I like drinking wine, all right? I'm passionate about all of those types of things, but it would be hard for me to start there and just jump into, well, what's my idea? So the next level you can go to is think about, well, who are you interested in helping? Because again, it helps if you are working on solving a problem for a group of people you care about, all right? So that might be people who are in the same situation as you, right? People who have the same circumstances or the same challenges. It might be that you care deeply about your grandmother or your grandfather. So maybe you're really concerned about the elderly, all right? And so that might be a group of people you'd want to target as potential customers, all right? But thinking about who it is you'd like to help is often a great way to start if you don't have an idea. Because now that you have a focus area of somebody you want to help, you can start digging deeper by talking to them and learning what their experiences are and what their challenges are. And now that will help you get better focus on problems that maybe you could help solve for them. So that's another way to come at this whole idea generation problem is, if you don't have an idea, one way to approach this is just, who would you like to help? What groups are out there that might be interesting to be focused on that you could help? So for example, I mentioned I like photography. So that I might be focused on photographers. Maybe because I like photography a lot, because I do photography, I realize that there are certain problems or challenges photographers face. And so I might want to focus on that group and on those problems that they're facing, and then try to think about solutions to solve those problems, how to make a photographer's job easier, how to make their life easier, right? And that could be from the very beginning of the process all the way to the very end of the process, looking at all of the challenges they face, all of the problems they face, and then trying to address some portion of that. You don't have to try to solve the entire, every problem in that spectrum. You might want to be focused on just one area of that spectrum. So the other thing then is, again, you need to dig deeper. You need to learn what their needs, wants, and problems are to whatever group it is that you want to be working on or focused on. All right. How are they dealing with those issues now? So now if this is a problem or that you've picked because you're experiencing it personally, that's great. There's nothing wrong with that as a starting point, but you want to go out and you need to talk to other people from that group, from that domain, and you need to find out, are they experiencing the same kind of challenges you are, right? Because maybe they aren't. Maybe things that you find really challenging and that you think is the most important problem that you'd want to solve for that group of people, when you talk to 25 or 50 other people in that kind of group, they might come back and they might have a completely different emphasis. And so that would be a good reason for you to stop and step back and say, well, maybe I'm focused on solving the wrong problem. While I think it's really important, they don't. And so you might want to shift and maybe consider more the problems that they're highlighting as opposed to the problem you've spent your time already focusing on and generating ideas for. All right. Now, in looking at how they're currently dealing with these issues, this is where you start to explore and learn about your competitors. All right. So at this point, you're learning from your potential customers who those competitors might be. And by the way, it could be direct competitors to you, or it might be just their own home solutions, their own workarounds of ways they're solving that problem. Otherwise, the status quo, what they're doing today to solve it. All right. And that's good information to have. You're going to need that in addition to doing your own research on what's out there in terms of the competition. But hearing from your target customers what they're currently using, what other products or services they're using is a great way to get that started and kicked off. All right, how can you add more value and be different? Now we're getting to the point where, again, as you're talking to customers, you're going to learn not just what their pain points are, but you're going to learn what other things they might want in a solution that they're not currently getting with what they're doing today. And that's an opportunity for you. So sometimes learning that there are all these competitors out there can be depressing and can seem like a real challenge if there's so many others out there, but it's also a great opportunity because if they're out there, if there's a lot of competitors, there must be gaps, there must be reasons why there's all these competitors. And so that means maybe there's an opportunity for you to identify a gap as well and try to have a product or a solution that helps to fill that gap and provide more value than the ones that are out there today. And then finally, once you've identified who your customers are, identified the problems or challenges, and again, not just from your perspective, but you've heard it and learned it from them, okay? And you've learned what they're currently doing today to solve these problems, all right? And you've listened to them to learn what are their real pains versus what are their nice to haves, what it would be the things that would just be great if they had it, right? That takes you above the competition. Once you've learned all of that, now you can focus on generating ideas, all right? So today, right now, if you've got an idea and you're sold on it, that's wonderful. But what I'd ask you to do is for another week or so, take that idea, put it on the shelf, and think about pursuing this process. Think about going through those couple steps and trying to learn more about your customers, their problems, how they're currently dealing with them, and what they really care about the most of all those problems, all right, before you go back and revisit that idea. And I guarantee you, if you do that, instead of just staying focused on the idea, you will probably come across new ways to add value, to take that existing idea, now when you pull it back off the shelf, and enhance the value of it and make it even better. So that's my challenge to you tonight. If you've already got an idea and if you're in love with that idea, that's great. I'm not asking you to drop it, but I am encouraging you to go ahead and make sure that you look at this other process and think about that. Okay, let me go over here a second. All right. So let's move on. So again, you need to think about the groups of people that you're interested in. Anybody want to share? If you've already got an idea, anybody want to share a typical group of people? Like, who are you trying to solve a problem for? Do I have any volunteers?
Children.
Okay, children. All right. Anybody else?
For me, I guess it would be people who want high quality supplements, but don't necessarily know where to find them.
Okay, high quality supplements. You mean like vitamins and things, or?
Correct.
Okay, all right.
The gluten-free community.
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
The gluten-free community.
Okay, all right. All right, so there are three very good domains, okay? Now, Anna, for you, I would suggest children's really broad, right? So you need to, I mean, it's great, I know we're just sharing here on the workshop, but you might want to think about different ways that you can get more specific about your potential group. So that might be children group you know, first grade through fifth grade, or sixth grade through high school, or high school age, or college age, right? You might want to think about, is the particular group you're interested in, is it male or female, right? Or gender neutral. You might want to think about, is it all students? Well, first of all, is it students even? Or is it just children, like maybe preschool? So you want to really be as specific as possible in terms of who the group is, all right? And that's also very helpful because it also addresses that second point on who's your customer versus who's your user. So if you're focused on providing a solution to a problem that maybe children have, it's probable that children aren't the ones that are going to be buying it. The people that would be buying it, the customers, would be the parents, right? As opposed to the children might be the actual users of that product or service. And it's important to understand that dynamic. Does that make sense, Anna?
It does, but in my situations, it's really different. But maybe, when I pitch that to you, we can just decipher it later down the road. But thank you. I do understand that.
Okay, all right. And then oftentimes as people approach this, again, they start very broad, but I would try to use that same process of, you have children, but you need to think in terms of age groups. You might need to think in terms of demographics, gender. You need to try to be as specific as possible, even in the area of supplements. Okay, there's this broad area of supplements, or it may be supplements focused in a particular area. So it could be supplements targeting bodybuilders. All right, that would be a very targeted, specific group, right? As opposed to people, I'll say me, seniors, okay, that might have a different interest in supplements because I'm in a different bracket than people that would be taking supplements for bodybuilding, all right? Gluten-free, that's pretty targeted and pretty specific. Off the top of my head, I can't come up with a real quick, fast example of how you would narrow that down even more, but there may be a way to even do that. All right. All right. So again, the point here is just you want to try to be as specific as possible. I mentioned that having a customer-centric approach is about following a design thinking process. And in design thinking, and I apologize, this is probably a little bit difficult to see, but design thinking is customer-centric. So first you go through this process of observing, trying to watch what type of process your customers or your users might be going through, and seeing how they're dealing with the particular problem that you're focused on. You might be talking to them to learn their stories, in that you'd be thinking or looking for different themes that might be coming out. So are there common problems that they all bring up? Is there a common sequence that they all seem to be going through? You're going to be always looking for, all right, so where do those patterns fit? And then where might those opportunities come from? And it isn't until you get to that point, and if you notice on a timeline, on a continuum, we don't get to solutions and to trying to actually generate and brainstorm solutions until you're 2/3 of the way through, which really says that you want to be spending most of your time getting ready for the idea competition, in this process of thoroughly understanding who you're working with or who you're focused on, the problems they're having, basically becoming an expert, putting yourself in their shoes, becoming an expert in how they think, how they go about this process, their process, all right, before you really start focusing on the solutions for them. All right, then you move into that latter part, which is generating the solutions, picking which ones are the best solutions, looking how to combine those, and then potentially going and coming up with some kind of prototype, and then hopefully eventually launching your business, all right? Some, launching and making that solution or that service available to them, all right? But it's about empathy, understanding their problems from their perspective. All right. So I've mentioned this before. You don't want to love the problem, or I'm sorry, you want to love the problem, not your solution. Because as you go through this, if you really try to follow this process with an open mind, you might find that the idea you have today is not the idea you're going to submit to the Be Your Own Boss Bowl. And that oftentimes happens. People, I'm sorry, to the idea competition. It often happens that people start off with an idea, and as they work through these next 4 or 5 weeks, they end up deciding that there's a bigger, better problem to solve, and they come up with a better idea to solve it than what they originally started with. All right. So again, this is where I say put your idea on the shelf for at least a week or so, focus on the problems that you're trying to solve and the people having those problems. And one way to come at this is you want a really good problem definition. All right. So one framework is, our users, whoever that is, okay, so these people need a better way to blank to do whatever it is they're trying to do because of blank. And the because is important because that gives context. And you need to understand the context as to why that's important to them. And you can't know that unless you've actually gone out and tried to listen to them and hear what they have to say. So, defining the problem, again, it's the same process, right? The same problem statement. So at some point right now, if you've got an idea, you might want to sit down separately and try to create your problem statement and be, again, as specific as possible so that you are really focused on a problem. And then you can test that that problem statement's valid when you go out and you talk to your potential target customers, right, to learn more about their experience. They may come back and share with you that they have 5 or 6 different problems doing something. And then part of what you need to determine is how would they rank those problems? Which is the worst for them? Okay, what's the most significant for them? The most meaningful, which is the one they would like solved the most, because that's where you'd want to spend your time and energy. If they have 10 problems and you're off trying to solve the least important problem, you're missing the point. All right. Let me stop there for just a second. Does anybody have any questions?
No, not yet.
Not yet? Okay. All right. Keith, I would just say you can, if you're in Startup Tree, you can book appointments with me on Startup Tree. Otherwise, just feel free to email me at greg.fegley@temple.edu, and we can try to set something up. But the quickest and easiest way to book time with me is through Startup Tree. All right. So if you're on Startup Tree, you can do that. All right. So back to this. So how do you learn what it is that people are going through? How do you learn what their experience is, what their difficulties, what their pain points are? Well, sometimes it's by going out and watching them, taking notes. Sometimes you could take pictures or videos, which I know can sound kind of creepy if you're just doing that, from afar, and it's almost like you're spying on them. But a lot of times what you capture in a picture or a video, you can go back and look at that again and refer to it, and you'll be able to spot things that you didn't notice while visually observing them live. All right. You also need to get out and talk to them. And I can't tell you how important, and I can't tell you enough how important that is. Talking to them, interacting with them, interviewing them. And then lastly there's that saying, walk a mile in someone else's shoes, so that you can experience what it is they're doing and firsthand the problems that they're having. All right. So they're all ways that you can observe and empathize. That's all part of this process of using design thinking. All right. The next concept I mentioned is about value, about how that can throw people. And I mentioned in that problem statement how that because statement is so important because it provides context. Here's a perfect example of that. So if you were in the desert, stranded in the desert, and you were able to come across a glass of water, that glass of water would have a lot of value, right? It might be the difference between life and death. However, if the context was shifted completely, and let's say you work at a restaurant and you're the person who waits tables and has to go in and clean up the table after everybody's done and get it ready and set up for the next party coming into the restaurant, right? A glass of water is not real valuable. In fact, it's a pain because it means having to carry that back, having to dump it out, then it's got to be washed before it can be reused again, right? So that glass of water has little or no value in this context, but in the context of being deserted in the desert, that glass of water has a lot of value. So context does play a role here, all right, and understanding why it's important to person in that context. Another way to think of value is what kinds of value do automobiles provide to people? Anybody want to share some thoughts or ideas? So what's the value that an automobile might provide to someone?
Transportation.
Okay, getting from point A to point B absolutely is a good example. What else? Anything else?
I was going to say like relative freedom, but I think transportation takes care of that.
Well, no, actually getting from A to B is one thing. Having the freedom to just get out and go somewhere, maybe to just get away, is actually a different kind of value. So I would agree with that. Freedom, having the freedom to go places, that's value.
It's very convenient. It saves time.
Convenience, exactly. You can go where you want, when you want, because you're not depending on a bus schedule, a subway schedule, okay? So yeah, convenience. These are all great examples. Cameron, did you have something?
Yeah, also storage, like you can physically keep stuff in your car,
Absolutely, absolutely. These are all great examples. So here's a couple others. So what about style, right? The type of automobile you have might provide value, right? Some people, 30 years ago, there weren't a lot of people renting limos to go to their high school proms, all right? But today, that's like a given for a lot of people going to the high school prom, all right? And so people want to get there in style. That has value. Forget the fact that it might cost $400, but it's the style that they want, right? That's the value they're looking for. Or what about safety, right? Some people, they look at automobiles and the technology that's available. They think of it in terms of safety, and there's value in safety. Or what about not just getting people from point A to B, but getting a lot of people from point A to B, if you have a large family? Or as Cameron said, what about cargo? What if you have a lot of cargo that you need to get from point A to point B, right? So these are all different kinds of value that are provided in an automobile, all right? And again, an exhilarating experience, okay? So some of these things you'll notice are a whole lot more concrete than others, all right? So getting from A to B is, you have a job to be done, and it's very concrete. You got to get to point B, right? Probably by a certain time. But how you get there in terms of the style or the type of experience that gets you there is a lot more emotional. It's not about just getting to point B. It's I want to get to point B fast, or I want to get to point B in luxury, right? I want to make a statement in how I arrive. Those are really emotional as opposed to very functional, all right? And that's an important distinction we're going to jump into in just a minute. Okay, so these are just some more examples, maybe a home office or a place to sleep, or maybe you're just environmentally conscious. And, automobiles are a statement that I care about the environment, all right? Okay, So that brings me to a tool that some of you may or may not. So I know some of the people on this workshop have already heard of and learned about how to use the value proposition canvas. I'm going to just briefly cover some of that tonight. On the right-hand side, the focus is on your customer. And that's why this person right in the very center, that's your target user. That's your ideal customer, all right? Over on the left-hand side, you have this little gift box in the middle, and that represents your product or your service, all right? And you want to have something where there's a good match between what your customer wants and what you provide. Now, how you go about that is by using something like the value proposition canvas to make sure that these things are aligned and that they mesh up nicely. So you start with, what is it that your customer wants to get done? What is it they're trying to accomplish? All right, so functionally, I want to get from point A to B, but I also might want to get to point A to B quickly. I might want to get to point A to B safely. I might want to get there in style, right? And then you look at, well, what are the pain points down here that are preventing me from doing that? So for example, just owning a car is expensive. It's the car, it's the maintenance, it's the gas, it's the insurance. These are all potential pain points, right? Or it might be, I have no place to park it, right? If you live in the city, that is a pain point, right? So you want to consider that. Then you also might want to consider, well, what are the kinds of gains that people would like to have? So maybe it's parking is a particular issue, but if a gain might be if I had a car that was easy to park, right? Or if I had a car that I could share with others, right? It might be a gain, like I could share the expense with others. So part of the value proposition canvas is fully understanding what it is your user is trying to accomplish, and then looking at the kinds of problems they're having accomplishing those jobs to be done, so that you can try to target your solution over here on the left-hand side as a way to solve their pain points and provide those extra gains, those extra nice to haves that they'd really be interested in, that would move them to want to buy your product or service over all of the competition that's out there. And another way to think about this in terms of pains and gains is, you know, when people have a migraine headache, right, what do they take? Do they take an Excedrin or Tylenol, or do they take vitamins, right? I think mostly people would be taking the Excedrin or the Tylenol, right? Because that's going to provide relatively quick relief to solve that pain. And people will go out and they'll buy that and they'll have that on hand. But people aren't taking, you know, vitamins necessarily to resolve a headache, okay? But they do take vitamins for a reason, because they're looking for a long-term benefit, right? Vitamins have that more longer-term impact of improving your health overall. So there's a difference between focusing your product or your service on trying to solve a pain point versus trying to solve a nice to have or you know, a gain, right? Desired gain. Okay, so as I mentioned, your first starting point is, you know, what are the kinds of jobs that your target customers are trying to get done? And I mentioned when we were talking about the automobile, how some of them are functional, like getting from A to B. Some of them may be more social, like having a car big enough that your whole family could participate in, or you and your friends, right? That they could all go to the concert together. Or emotional, being able to arrive in style, making a statement, right? Or just basic needs, all right? And, you know, again, the basic needs might be the safety, okay? Or it might be just, again, back to that functional, getting from A to B. So you want to make sure that when you're thinking about what it is they're trying to accomplish, breaking it down into these categories, because there's different ways you can focus your solution and tailor it to address each of those categories. So most people, maybe you've heard this before, if you talk about the jobs to be done framework, the statement is people don't buy a 1/4-inch drill because they want a 1/4-inch drill. They don't want to buy it just to have it in their toolbox. They buy it because they need to accomplish a job. And that's typically to drill a hole. Now, that's fine if you understand that. But what's more important is again, the context of, well, why do they want to drill a hole? And you want to get to what's behind that very functional job, right? Drilling the hole is just part of the process. If they're drilling a hole because they want to hang a picture of their family, right, then they're solving an emotional need, right? Why do they want that picture on the wall? Because they want to see their family. They want to think about the good times that they've been with them. Or maybe they want to drill a hole in the wall because they want to run wires through the wall so they can put their big screen TV up there. Now, why do they want a big screen TV? Well, it might be because they want to be very social. They want to have all their friends and family over to watch the Super Bowl. Okay, so it might be because they're trying to accomplish this social job to be done, of being able to get more people involved and more people to enjoy that experience. So again, thinking about jobs to be done, you want to try to break it down into, well, what is it they're trying to do and what category does it fall into? And then that also helps you to take and look at the pains and the gains, all right? Pains can be the negative emotions, it could be costs or risks, all right? And looking at the physical versus the emotional needs or the social needs, if you know of those categories, you can focus on those categories. Oftentimes, people completely forget the emotional and the social aspects of the job that needs to get done. So here's an example of a jobs to be done framework as it applies to what most of you might consider to be a pretty boring industry, and that's the paint industry. So, people have spent millions of dollars trying to develop a better paint, all right? But Dutch Boy decided they were going to take a somewhat different approach. They took a customer-centric approach and looked at what's the whole painting experience. And one of the issues that people used to come up with is, well, what are all of the distasteful aspects of painting a room, right? And one of them was, you buy this gallon can of paint, and then you have this messy process of pouring the paint out of that paint can into some other container that's easier to hold, that you can actually use to paint woodwork or to roll on your walls. And not only did you always spill it while you were pouring it, but then you had to wipe up the can, and and it was just messy. Dutch Boy said, well, we already have a pretty good paint, but we could make the experience better by making it easier for the people buying our paint to pour it out into this smaller container. And so not only did they design a more convenient paint can, right? It's made out of plastic, so it's recyclable. It has a built-in handle that makes it easier to pour with one hand, as opposed to having to use two hands, one to hold the handle and then one to tip the can. Also, it's got that really nice spout that makes it so that when you pour it, it goes exactly where you want it. Makes it easy to stop the drips, all right? I have dozens of contraptions in my basement that I bought separately to try to accomplish this. But Dutch Boy, simply by redesigning the container, provided a better solution, added value to their paint product, just in the way they packaged it and the way they offered it. So they looked at what the job to be done was, and they found a way to make it easier for the person who might be looking to buy their paint. And they recaptured a big segment of the market by offering a more easy and convenient packaging solution for their product. So again, a good example of how value can come in, not just in producing a better paint or a longer lasting paint or a paint that only goes on and you only need one coat, but they looked at the entire experience of how you provide that solution, and they were able to add value in a way that others were missing, completely missing. Same thing with this. I mean, school desk chairs had existed for 100 years, right, or more. But now, people have looked at, well, what's that process? What's the job to be done? It's not just about sitting down and writing. You need storage in a desk chair. Desk chairs need to be mobile now. Oh, by the way, they need to be not just for right-handed people, because we're beyond the point of making everybody right-handed. Now people that are left-handed need desks as well. So here's an example of an evolved solution to a problem that solved many different problems instead of just providing a place to sit and write. Whoops. Okay. All right. So I'm going to move off value for a second, but before I do, let me stop. Any questions on how to be thinking about and looking at value, not just for the core problem, but also on the peripheral, on the entire process of how people might be experiencing that problem? Any questions in that area?
No.
Okay. All right. So let's talk about another way, if you were struggling with, how to come up with ideas or where to be focused. Another tool I'd suggest for you to think about using is do some research and look for trends. So trends either in what you were passionate about, okay, if that's where you're starting from, or trends in the particular customers that you're focused on. What are the trends affecting that group of people? Or even trends in the type of problem that you're trying to solve. And there's a tool that you can use called a Pest Analysis, and it looks at just 4 areas of where you can do some research and try to look at trends. So political analysis is trends in terms of regulation, government regulation, federal or state regulation within an industry. So for example, the food industry would have certain regulations for safety, the drug industry, same thing, transportation industry, same thing. There's lots of different regulations. I mean, even in the political arena, we had a team a couple of years ago was very focused on politics and policy. And so they were looking at trends in politics and the regulations of politics. So that's from the political aspect. Economic analysis, what are the trends in the economy today? Are salaries going up or down? Inflation going up or down? Joblessness? What about methods of payment, for example? So cryptocurrency is all the buzz, right? So you need to be looking at what are the trends affecting economic portion. Trends in technology, kind of self-explanatory. There's always new evolving technology. What's out there? What's happening? What are people looking to use? What's the latest new technology, whether it be in motors, whether it be in batteries, whether it be in software development or software solutions, software as service platforms, et cetera. All right. And then also from a social aspect. So what are the trends affecting society? What's driving people to do things? All right, whether it's through social media, the types of social media they're using, what are influencers doing? You need to be thinking about what are all of these various trends and consider them, what impact they may have on the customer, what impact they could potentially have on the problems those customers are having, and then what impact they might have on the kinds of solutions that you'd want to be proposing. All right, and it's also important because, for example, if the trend would be that people are moving away from CDs and DVDs for video and for music, and they're moving to streaming services, then you wouldn't want to be developing a better CD player, right? Because that market would be shrinking. All right. So even though you might be able to come up with a better player, you need to be thinking about, was it a big enough problem that I'd want to be investing all my time and energy and money and resources into coming up with a better DVD or CD player, when in fact the market's shrinking. And while it may be profitable initially, what's the longevity for that product or that market? All right. So trends really have an impact on where you want to be focused as well. All right. So once you've learned about your customer, their problems, once you've put yourself in their shoes, tried to empathize with them, done your research in terms of the trends, you're finally to the point where you can be really focused in on that problem statement. Remember, I gave you that template for that problem statement earlier on. And now you need to be thinking about, how do I generate all those ideas as ways to solve that problem? And again, you need to generate hundreds of ideas. All right. If you have an idea today, as I said, great, put it on the shelf. I'd love for you to develop another 50 or 100 different ideas. And then you'll be able to step back next week and take a look at what's the potential to rank some of those ideas, focus on the top 4 or 5, and then look for ways to combine them to create more value, all right, solve more of those pain points than the current competition that's out there. Right? And brainstorming is a great way to come at this, where you generate lots of ideas. You just let them flow. There's a good rule in brainstorming that nobody should ever be judging ideas while you're generating ideas. So the rule is every idea is a good idea until you're done brainstorming. Then you go back and you reevaluate them, all right? And the more radical the ideas are, the better. The more off the wall, the better. Because if you don't push yourself now to think out of the box, then you're likely coming up with ideas that are just me too solutions and probably too similar to what's already out there. So you really do need to push yourself, all right? You can always dial it back, but it's really hard to keep pushing it forward. So go for it. Go for it right now with those big, bold ideas and look for ways to eventually end up combining them. All right. I'm going to just quickly, I already talked about on the left-hand side, you're going to be in your product or service. You're going to be looking for what are those things that solve the pain points and address both the functional, the social, emotional, and the basic needs that they have. All right. What in real tangible terms, what are they and what can you be doing? And one of the things you want to do is, I mentioned, as you're empathizing, talking to your customers, and not just learning what their pain points are, but ranking their pain points, you need to then also look at how many of those pain points you're solving, and are you solving the most important ones that they've identified? If they have 10 pain points and you're solving the bottom 5, you're missing the mark. All right, you may have a decent solution, but it might not be enough to get them to change from what they're doing today to move over to your solution. All right, and again, you need to outline the value that you're providing, not just on the pain side, but also on the gain side. What are the other things that you can do to increase their revenue or profit, to provide more utility, to give them added benefits that they didn't realize they wanted or needed even. All right, so that brings, we're getting to the end here. So typically we get to this point, and one of the things I would say to you is, as you've talked to your customers, and again, hopefully they're telling you what they're doing today to solve that problem, and that's helping to make you aware of what are all the existing competitors that are out there. But you also need to do your own research. You have to do research. If you go blindly into the competition, saying, I've got this great idea, and you haven't really researched to see if it already exists out there, you will be surprised in most cases that there is something out there that already exists. So I encourage you to do 3 things. Google your idea. Do it today if you've got an idea, because you may as well know today if somebody else is already providing the same thing or something similar. All right. Also, don't just Google it. Go to Amazon, go to Alibaba. They're the two biggest commercial product delivery sites in the planet. All right. Between those three sources, Google and those two, online retail outlets, you will find all kinds of creative solutions that already exist out there. Now, if you've researched them and you don't find your idea, then that's a big thumbs up. You're in good standing. But if you don't think you're out of the, you're out of the woods, because there's still some other steps in this process. Okay. But that's a really good first sign. If you've gotten that far, you've looked at those three sources and you do not see anything out there, that's great. All right. I'll give you an example of a past idea that a student had in one of my classes. They came up with a knee brace that provided both cold and hot therapy. And I thought for sure that existed. And I encouraged them to do all the research. They came back, they said, no, it doesn't exist. And typically, if I hear that from a student, I'll do the research and I usually find it. But you know what? They were right. There was nothing out there anywhere that I could find. And I really worked hard to find it. Nothing that combined all of those solutions. And that was awesome. So then I encouraged them to keep going. But now the challenge was for them to figure out, okay, that's a great idea to combine the two, but what are some of the problems in doing that? What's the technology that you would use to accomplish that? And then with those problems they identified, start ticking off, how would you solve those problems? And they worked really hard on that idea and they came up with a really solid solution. All right. So again, that's all part of this process, but you need to know what's out there already that's the same or similar to what you're proposing. And also, if there's something else out there and it's similar, right, you need to think about, well, how can you be more unique? How can you be different? How can you add more value to what's already there? If your idea is an app or software as a solution service, again, go to the app stores, see what else is out there. Every year I hear lots of ideas from students about apps. There's an app for that. And then I go and I Google or I look at the app stores and I find, yeah, there's 16 different apps already exist that do this. How are you different and better? Right? And that's the question you ultimately have to answer. And so students, sometimes they'll come back, they'll say, okay, I found my idea. In fact, I found 5 other solutions out there that are very similar to what I'm doing. Now, what do I do? All right. So don't despair, don't give up, but there's another level that you need to do research on. So part of your competitive analysis is, so what value are they providing versus the value you provide? How are they providing it? And you need to be looking for where you're overlapping, providing the same kind of value, and where are the gaps? And obviously you want to focus on the gaps, because if you can boost your value proposition and provide more than what they're providing, okay, that's an opportunity for you to differentiate yourself. Then you also need to look at if there are a lot of different solutions out there, right? In some respects, that's a positive, because that means that the market is supporting all these different solutions. So the market in general hasn't found one that they found to be superior. All right. But you do need to determine whether or not there are too many already, and whether or not you can identify what the gap is and where you could provide that added value that others aren't. And if you can't, then you might want to just say, hey, it's too crowded, I should move on to a different idea, or potentially maybe even trying to solve a different problem. All right. And then you also may want to take a look at, well, all right, my solution is very similar to these others, but maybe there's a way not just to pivot your idea, maybe there's a way for you to pivot the problem. So maybe you want to focus on a slightly different problem, a different part of the process, a different part of the user's experience, and try to solve that part of the problem. So I often tell students, and in our classes, we teach, you know, if you want to come up with a better sneaker, that's great. But you're going up against companies like Nike and Adidas who are spending millions of dollars developing technology to produce better sneakers. So are you really going to come up with a better sneaker, or can you come up with a better overall sneaker experience? Is there a way to design a product that the delivery of that product? So either how it's sold, how it's packaged, whether it's recyclable or not. You know, is there a way to come up with a narrower niche market that you could come up with a product that specifically meets their needs that maybe Nike or Adidas hasn't bothered to address yet? All right. And if you can, then you may still have an opportunity because now you've focused on a different part of the problem. All right. Another way to think about this is maybe your target market and the value you're providing, maybe that same kind of value could be provided to a different group of people in a completely different environment, a different market, right? And that may be an opportunity for you because those people have never had anybody focused on providing a solution to them. And so it may be that you have identified a real problem. You just need to find a different group of people that have that same problem where nobody's, you know, paying any attention to them and providing them a better solution. And this is an area where oftentimes the technology can be adapted into different environments. All right, so one technology being used here hasn't really been applied into another area, but could easily be moved over into another area. And, you know, a good example of that might be with eBay. When eBay first launched as a marketplace, right? They were one of the very first and the very few. But now there are hundreds of marketplaces out there. They're all doing something very similar to eBay, but they've got a very targeted niche market that they focused on, and they've been able to carve away some market share and provide a customized solution to that group of people. And they've been successful doing that. All right. And then last but not least is, you know, if you truly, after looking at each of these different perspectives, if you truly can't come up with something that you're totally different on, then you might just want to find a completely different problem to solve. All right. Don't waste your time. Do the evaluation, you do the research, the evaluation, and then you might want to move on. All right. Okay. So I'm going to stop there and see if you've got any questions about any of that material. Any thoughts about how this might impact the ideas that you have tonight?
I think for me, it gives me a good outline of where to start and kind of a better direction than before. So I think that from this, I can move into the research aspect a little bit more, kind of just start with the raw research and kind of get to know my problem a little better rather than jumping into the solution, which is kind of what I was doing before.
Yeah, that's very common. Most people have an idea about the problem. They have kind of an idea who has that problem. And oftentimes, as I said, it's centered around their own experience, which is okay as a starting place, right? But I encourage you to quickly get out of looking at it from your perspective and try to go out and identify who's the external group of people that might have that same problem. And then you've got to talk to them. You've got to observe them, talk to them, interview them, do your research, learn as much about their experience to see if they share the same problem you have, all right? Because otherwise you might be spinning your wheels and find out that the problem you think is just this huge problem really isn't a big problem for most people.
Right. And I also had a quick question. Are we able to access these slides from today?
Yeah,
or the recording?
yeah, tonight's recording, we'll be putting it up in the Google Drive, the shared Google Resources folder. So the video will be up there, the slides will be up there, so that you can go back and you can rewatch the video, or you can go back and go through the slides, and as well as some of the other tools that we share with you, so that you have all the information you need to prepare your submission.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, and also part of the reason why I go into, for some of you, you might be thinking, why do I need to see a value proposition, and why is he breaking it down? Like, I don't need all that. But in a way, you really do, because if you go back to the earlier slides that I showed and the 6 sections that you're going to have to answer, right? One of the documents, that submission guideline with all of the tips in there, takes those 6 sections and it asks all kinds of questions that you need to think about answering. How are you going to answer these questions as part of your submission? And each of those 6 sections are very much aligned with the steps that I walked you through tonight. And so that's why I go into that. All right, it helps set that framework so you can break this down, this whole submissions process, into those 6 steps.